Welcome to my podcast, Loving Courageous. I'm your host, Demetrius. And for today's episode, I will be speaking about Victor Carl Honey, the black veteran whose body parts were sold without his family consent. Victor Carl Honey spent 30 years in Dallas being homeless due to suffering from mental illness. He passed away in September of 2022 at the age of 58. He also served the U.S. Army for 10 years. Even though he served the Army, Victor Carl Honey was also neglected by the government. The government who gave his body away to medical university, then sold off his body parts to other companies without his prior consent or approval from his family. According to investigative report by NBC News, Victor Carl Honey's right leg was dissected and sold off to a Swedish medical device maker for $341 to train clinicians to harvest veins with the device. His torso was sold off to a medical education company in Pittsburgh for $900, so trainees could practice implanting a spine stimulator. And a pair of his bones from his skull was sold off to the U.S. Army for $210 to educate military medical personnel at a hospital near San Antonio. Victor Carl Honey's family did not learn about his passing until a year and a half later, when his son had a chance meeting with a woman who had been friends with his father. The family then learned about his dismemberment after being contacted by NBC News. Victor Carl Honey's sister, whose name is Brenda Cloud, told reporters, I quote, "It's like a hole in your soul that can never be filled. We feel violated." As a veteran, Victor Carl Honey was entitled to a burial with military honors, but there was money to be made. The selling of body parts from unclaimed bodies has been very common in Dallas and Tarrant counties since 2019 under an agreement with the University of North Texas Health Science Center, which makes $2.5 million a year selling body parts to medical organizations. NBC News reported that more than 2,350 unclaimed bodies were given to the university over the past 5 years, with 830 of those bodies selected for dissection. Most of the bodies were mainly black male and mentally ill and were homeless. They were then cremated with their ashes scattered at sea or interred in local cemeteries. At least 12 cases, family members have been looking for their relatives, but nobody from the government had contacted them before they were contacted by NBC News. When University of North Texas Health Science Center was first approached by reporters, officials from the Health Science Center defended the practice, arguing that it was essential for training future doctors. The university made a statement on August the 4th saying, I quote, "Bodies of deceased individuals entrusted to Health Science Center are treated with the utmost dignity and respect regardless of the source. We care deeply for all our donors and understand the gift and legacy these individuals offer through real-life enhancement of medical education, biomedical research, and clinical skills training." Now, the National Alliance to End Homelessness reports that homelessness increased by more than 12% in January of 2023 compared to January of 2022, which would likely have led to increased profits for the Health Science Center. Now, due to NBC News reporters, the Health Science Center had a change of heart 6 weeks later. The university made a statement on September the 13th saying, I quote, "As a result of the information brought to light through your inquiries, it has become clear that failures existed in the management and oversight of the University of North Texas Health Science Center Will Body Program. The program has fallen short of the standards of respect, care, and professionalism that we demand." Now, in the initial statement, the university says Dallas and Tarrant counties were doing their best to seek surviving relatives. And it is only after they are unable to find the relatives or discover the relatives, are unable or unwilling to take responsibility, that the bodies are then used for medical research. However, in the case of Victor Carl Honey, his family said nobody had contacted them before they were contacted by NBC News, even though his son shares his first and last name and lives in Dallas area. Also, another person who had a change of heart was the top elected official in Tarrant County, Judge Tim O'Hare, who sits on the county commission and voted to renew the contract with the Health Science Center in January, and is vowing to end any and all immoral, unethical, and irresponsible practices stemming from this program. He said, I quote, "No individual's remains should be used for medical research, nor sold for profit without their pre-death consent or the consent of their next of kin. The idea that families may be unaware that their loved ones' remains are being used for research without consent is disturbing, to say the least." Now, however, the Science Center and County Commission only had a change of heart when this type of practice was exposed by the media. Now, a professor at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, whose name is Thomas Champney, said that it was always an unethical practice. Thomas Champney, who researches the ethical use of human bodies, said to NBC News, "The county and the medical school are doing this because it saves them money, but that doesn't make it right. Since these individuals did not consent, they should not be used in any form or fashion." Victor Carl Honey's family buried his remains in Dallas Fort Worth National Cemetery on June the 3rd, a military cemetery operated by the Department of Veteran Affairs. Now, black body parts being sold in America is nothing new. America has a very deep history of selling black body parts without families' consent. Black people's body parts has been used for research since 1763, with the dissection of corpse of the enslaved for the first anatomy lecture in the American colonies. The systematic collection of black people remains, as well as those of people from other marginalized communities, began with the work of Samuel George Morton. He is also considered the founder of American physical anthropology. Samuel George Morton professionalized the acquisition of human remains in the name of scientific practice and education. He uses subjects turned specimens to promote racist hierarchies through pseudoscientific interpretations of cranial measurements. His research resulted in his 1839 magnum opus Crania Americana, with hundreds of hand-drawn images of skulls and faulty logic racial categorization. His collection ended up at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, the impact of Morton's collection and career bounced far and wide, laying the foundation for unethical practices built on the theft, transportation, and accumulation of human remains. Collecting surged during the time of the Civil War, and from the late 19th century into the 20th century, skeletal collections and museums across the country skyrocketed. Now, grave robbing in the black communities was a big thing, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries, where it ushered in a new method of medicine focused on increased anatomical knowledge and dissections. Now, in turn, more corpses were needed, but the demand for corpses far exceeded the supply. And at the time, social attitudes toward dissection and dismemberment of a corpse were not positive. They were primarily perceived as punishment for the most heinous criminals. So, grave robbing was the solution. People would steal not only the bodies of enslaved black people who passed away, but also the corpse of black men, women, and children from their graves, and would sell them to medical schools. Now, during this time of the 18th century, most of New York City's dissection tables were full of black bodies. Despite the black community only accounted for 15% of the population at the time. Now, this practice was very common in Virginia and Maryland. Virginia Commonwealth University apologized for this practice back in September 2022. But the next following year, 2023, Virginia lawmakers failed to pass a resolution acknowledging and apologizing for this inhumane treatment in their commonwealth. So black body parts were not just taken out of the graveyards, but also there were very unethical experiments that were taking place in prisons. So from 1950 through the 1970s, Philadelphia health officials allowed the prominent researcher Dr. Albert Kligman to conduct dangerous experiments on incarcerated people, most who were black. Kligman repeatedly and purposely exposed black men to dermatological, biochemical, and pharmaceutical experiments. One of the most significant was testing dioxin, the toxic chemical in the biochemical weapon Agent Orange. The city of Philadelphia and related institutions apologized in October of 2022, but the apology does not remedy the lifelong scars and lingering health impacts from those experiments. And sadly, unethical experiments are still happening to this day in prisons. Incarcerated individuals in Arkansas were given a cocktail of drugs, one of them ivermectin, to treat COVID-19. Now, ivermectin has not been approved by the FDA for treating COVID-19. After suffering a long list of side effects, the men were informed that one of the drugs they received was ivermectin, a drug usually used to treat cows and horses. Now, this type of abuse of black bodies who were incarcerated did not just affect black men, but also black women experienced abuse and exploitation in a different form. Women were often forcibly sterilized without their consent. Between 1909 and 1979, California forcibly and legally sterilized around 20,000 women, most of who were black women and other women of color who were incarcerated or under state guardianship because of some perceived incapacity. In North Carolina, sterilizations were also used against black women in state institutions to weed out any feeble-minded. Due to the remains of black people who were freed or enslaved, this created the foundation of museums of medicine, anthropology, archaeology, natural history, and more. That is all for the topic that I have for today, and now we'll get into the Black History fact. So today I will speak of Empress Menen of Ethiopia. Empress Menen was the wife to Emperor Haile Selassie. She was a powerful advocate for Ethiopia's modernization and African self-determination on the world stage. A champion of education and women's rights, she established the Empress Menen School for Girls in Addis Ababa, the first all-girls school, as well as built hospitals and sponsored initiatives for the poor and disabled. That is all for my episode for today. Thank you everyone for listening to my podcast, and I hope you all have a lovely day.